Thank you, sir, for the introduction. And it is always a privilege for me to come and speak for the members of Tirupur branch, because almost it's like my own hometown. Whenever I'm coming and meeting, it is a matter of pride to come and discuss with all of you. Majority of the times, it's like visiting your own relative rather than coming and making a CP seminar presentation. And this time I have been denied the opportunity of enjoying your hospitality. But anyway, I will get that double hospitality when I'm visiting next time Tirupur branch. As far as today's program is concerned, sorry for the technical hitch which has actually happened from my side and not from the branch side. We delayed by 5 minutes on that. The very important discussion which we are going to have is how we will be going to do our audit for March 2020, especially companies audit. And when I'm saying company audit, I'm not going to stop only with company audit, because it will be having a limited interest. So I'm also going to discuss a little bit on the other audits, like tax audit related things, because audit is an audit. So whatever you do, whether you are doing a company audit, you are doing a tax audit, the expectation from the regulators are remaining to be the same. Maybe you are going to comply with the provisions of the Companies Act when you are doing an audit of a company, but when you are doing an audit of a tax case in 44AB, you are relying on, or you are going to depend on the work performed for the purposes of Income Tax Department. So in both the sides, there is a law which is prescribing certain things has to be done by the auditor, and we will be doing that discussion throughout. And since you have said that it should be on company audit with special reference to standards and auditing, what we will be trying to deal with is that we will discuss the audit with respect to the standards on auditing, and what are all the new things which we have to keep it in our mind, especially with respect to the Companies Act, especially with respect to the present situation of lockdown and related issues which have impacted a lot of our clients, their day-to-day business, their cash flows, all those things are getting disturbed. And in that particular situation, whether any special consideration which we have to take into consideration in respect of the compliance with the Companies Act, with respect to audit of a company, all those things also we will see as part of our discussion today. That is what our plan. And what we are going to see is that maybe I can say that we are going to discuss what is audit and what is the expectation from the auditors. Unless we know what is the expectation of the users, what is the expectation of the regulators, we may be doing audit according to our regular style, and sometimes something is very peculiarly required or very specifically required, we may miss it, and to that extent there could be a possibility of we are getting caught into the litigation or disciplinary action, whatever may be. So how we will ensure that whatever we are doing as an audit, a regular audit, we are not getting into any trap. In fact, some people used to say that whether the session itself is to discourage doing an audit for a company. So I don't want to say like that, but what I'm trying to say is that we are actually doing a perfect audit for every client, whether it's a company client or non-corporate client. We are actually doing a very good work. Unfortunately, the way in which we carry on certain work and how we have maintaining our work papers may not meet the requirement of the statutory authorities or the regulators, and to that extent we have been questioned for the quality of the work which we have performed. If you ask me, I have not necessarily I have worked with only the southern side of chartered accountants, but also I have worked with western region, northern region, eastern region, central region. In everywhere I have worked, but I have seen that the level of expertise and professionalism and the quality which has been shown by our chartered accountants from the southern region is very, very high. For two reasons. One, we always wanted to update ourselves with respect to changes which is happening in respect of law, in respect of audit procedures, in respect of expectations of the regulator. We are trying, and also what is happening in the economy. We are always wanted to be updated with the relevance of doing our work with respect to the audit, whether it's a corporate audit, whether it's a audit of a non-corporate entity. We are always very clear. Why I'm using the word non-corporate audit also, in Tirupur, it's very common that the industries are set up in a structure other than company, and to that extent they may be going for a very high level of loans from the bankers for setting up the factory or setting up the industry, and those financial statement may require a special audit to be done, and audit report should be attached. So in that case also, how our the expectation comes from the regulator is one of the discussion which we are planning. The second is, we will look into what is the responsibility of the auditors, whether anything under the sky is the auditor's responsibility, or the auditors have been directed to do certain audit procedure in accordance with certain prescribed rules and regulations. If we comply with the regulations, whether anybody can question us, that is exactly what we are trying to say, is that the standards on auditing, which prescribes that this is the way in which you are supposed to do your audit of a particular component. For example, if I am validating fixed asset, or I am verifying inventory, if I am verifying the cash and bank balances or borrowings from the banks, when I am verifying the debtors, there are guidelines which are available by the standards on auditing. To that extent, we have followed the standards on auditing and also maintain a reasonable documentation. I'm not saying that it should be very strong documentation. In a small and medium practitioner case, if we are spending more time on just documentation, it will be an issue. But what I believe is that there should be a reasonable level of documentation which should be maintained to show what is the work which we have performed and how we have reached the conclusion. So accordingly, we will try to understand what are our responsibility. And there are some services which we are actually doing. For example, when we are doing an audit, we have certain standards on auditing. When we are doing certifying a provisional financial statements, there is a separate standards on auditing. When we do an inspection audit or a revenue audit or a stock audit for a bank, we are having separate standards on auditing which has to be covered. So we will discuss about what could be the services which we will be rendering and what are all the standards on auditing which will normally cover or help us or guide us to maintain our audit records. And in the process, we will also have an overview of the standards on auditing. I will pick up a little bit of the certain important standards on auditing which has to be applied when we are doing an audit. Even for a smaller companies, we should apply certain procedures which I will discuss. And apart from that, I am picking up two important standards. One is audit documentation. We do 100% of the work, but unfortunately the document is not reflecting. So we will pick up the audit documentation, how it is expected to be maintained, we will discuss. And another issue which everyone is talking about in COVID-19 situation is that whether the entity can continue as a going concern for the next 12 months from the end of the reporting period. This is the next important question which comes to our mind, because the institute has also sent out an advisory relating to specific areas the auditors are expected to take care for March 2020. So we will discuss a little bit and what are the precautions which we have to take into consideration with respect to the present scenario of COVID-19 and the related lockdown, related maybe low productivity which has been achieved and low level of cash flows being generated by the clients. What would be the impact? Let us discuss that as well, because that will straight away have an impact in the current year's audit of companies as well as non-corporate entities. That is what we are planning to discuss. And to come to the definition of audit, we may know that what is the audit, but I'm just trying to bring it again for the purposes of our understanding. What is an audit? Then we will focus on whether an audit has to be taken care in the right spirit, including when we are doing an audit of an unlisted company or a private limited company, or when we are doing an audit of a partnership, when we are doing an audit of a proprietorship, or when we are doing an audit of a charitable organization, whether the audit covers the same gambit of work which we have to perform. If you see the definition says audit is an independent examination of financial statements. Perfectly all right. We know that as auditors, we are independent auditors. And that is the reason why the audit report is also saying independent auditors report. So on the face of it itself, we are saying we are independent of the audit client. That means what? We should be only doing our audit. We should not get into any type of management related services, or we are not doing a management activities for the client. Section 144 of the Companies Act actually prohibits certain services not to be done. And the Code of Ethics, which 2019 Code of Ethics, which is going to be implemented from 1st of July, effective for all the work which we are going to do, is also stringent with respect to what auditors should, how auditors should demonstrate independence outside the audit client. But the independence is a thin line between what we are doing as a service and what is prohibited. It's a thin line. For example, if I'm saying, if client has given the tally backup and we are taking it into our system, doing our audit through the system, because doing audit with the tally, using tally will be an easier job for us. From the ledger, we can drill down to the, from the balance sheet or P&L, we can drill down to the ledger. From the ledger, we can go to the month. From the month, we can go to the entries. And from the entries, we can go into the specific entry, right? And we can also do a lot of exceptional work when we are trying to analyze what are all the major items for a particular expenditure or something like that. We can analyze the data also. So when we take the data backup from the client and putting into our server, and we are doing the review. During the review, we are finding certain entries are not in accordance with the requirement of the Act, requirement of the income tax provisions. Say, for example, client has debited the repairs and maintenance expenses, whereas it should have been capitalized. What we normally do in a previous scenario where we don't do audit with systems, we take the printout of the ledger and do the ledger review and then make audit journals, right? Nowadays, what we do, we straight away go to that entry, amend that entry, delete that entry or pass a new entry, right? So whether it will be construed as we are doing an accountant's job or we are doing an auditor's job. This is the thin line of difference which I am trying to say. So when you are passing entries into that, or you are passing entry as an auditor or you are passing entry as an accountant, could be a question mark. So my suggestion is that when we are talking about independent examination of financial statements, when you are doing this type of activity, and in fact, I'm very, very diplomatic in using that word. You are taking the tally backup from the client and doing your audit entries, right? Sometimes we may even go for a different scenario where your team is maintaining that books of accounts also. So that is what I'm not actually making it as a statement. But in case, if such a type of scenario is there, how you are going to ensure that you are maintaining an independence of the audit client, that the entries which you are passing is only an audit journal. My suggestion is there is a provision even in tally to pass audit journal entries and keep track of those entries. Take a printout, keep it in your audit work paper, saying that these are all the entries which we have passed. So to that extent, it is possible for you to communicate that we have only done an audit rather than doing an accounting for the client. I'm just giving one simple example. A lot of other questions will also come in. If you have any questions, you can actually put it in the chat box. I will take the questions and answer the questions also appropriately at the relevant time. Another question which normally comes to us is that we maintain or we file TDS returns for the client. We file GST returns for the client. We do reconciliation of the GST or forms. All these things, whether it is a management activity, fortunately, the institute has very clearly mentioned that no, it is not a prohibited services. It is, you are doing this as an independent work, and accordingly, it is not an issue. That's what it has been mentioned. So accordingly, we need not worry about it, right? So whatever we are doing at present can be done. You file the tax return for the client from your IP address. You are filing the TDS return from your IP address. You are filing your client's GST returns from your IP address. Nothing to worry, because these are all independent work and you are not doing any management services. So what is expected is you are doing internal audit and you are also doing statutory audit. Maybe the client says that I don't want to have two auditors. Why can't you regularly come and check our records and also do the statutory audit? It will complement each other. The client says, perfectly all right. Only thing is, don't say that it's an internal audit. Don't say that it's a management audit. You are doing the audit, statutory audit, but you are doing an interim audit in every month. And that type of documentation or letter of engagement will make you very, very clear that whatever you are doing is within the ambit of the independence, and it is not conflicting with what is the prohibited services as per Section 144 of the Companies Act. Another question people always ask is, when I am certifying any certificate which I am issuing to my client, whether that is allowed as a statutory auditor. Definitely, because you are an independent auditor. That is the reason why they are coming and getting a service certificate from you. That is also permitted. So majority of the work which we are doing will be permitted. What will be prohibited? Two things will be straight away prohibited: maintaining accounts for the client. Second is doing internal audit and also trying to do the statutory audit. These two are straight away prohibited when I'm seeing from the angle of a small and medium practitioners. Bigger audit firms will be doing a lot of other activities. For example, they will help in setting up even the software. That software setting up is prohibited. But in small and medium practice, we will not be involved in doing any such activity. Okay. Only if you are having questions, please put that. That will be a better choice, because we have already said good evening to everybody. We will only concentrate on that. So now we are talking about independent examination of financial statements. When the definition continues, it says that of any entity. Any entity, when we are saying, what do you mean by any entity? Are you talking about audit means it's for company? Audit means it's for a tax audit? Audit means for audit of a charitable organization, but it uses the word any entity. What do you mean by that entity? It says it may be profit oriented or it may not be profit oriented. That means even a charitable organization, when you are doing the audit, you are governed by the principles of standards and auditing. That's the important point which you have to have. When you are doing a tax audit, you are governed by the principles of standards and auditing. Apart from, naturally, when you are doing a company audit, you are expected to maintain your records in accordance with the standards and auditing, because the audit report, we are confirming that we have carried out our audit according to the standards and auditing. We will come to that little later. But equal importance is there for profit-oriented entity or not for profit-oriented entity. And interestingly, it says, irrespective of its size. Maybe when you are trying to claim, I'm doing an audit of a very small company, whereas my fellow chartered accountant is doing an audit of a big company. He is doing a lot of work. He is maintaining a lot of work, a lot of work papers. He is doing a lot of work in accordance with standards and auditing. I'm doing only a small audit. Why should I worry about that? For me, why should I consider keeping records as per standards and auditing? When you ask this question, please go back and refer to the definition which I'm putting on the screen, irrespective of its size. Okay, audit is an audit. Only thing is, extent of audit procedure which you are doing may not be required for a smaller audit. You can do the audit in a very simple and effective manner. We will discuss about how we can do a simple and effective audit for a smaller entity and for a bigger entity, what type of additional work which we can perform and get a comfort. We will discuss that. And again, it says, irrespective of the size as well as legal form. That means what? If we are coming to this particular seminar with an intention that standards on auditing is applicable only for company audit, now you will erase that mindset, because irrespective of the size, irrespective of the legal form, you are carrying out an audit. And that audit is carried out for the purposes of expressing an opinion. When I'm giving a certificate, whether it's an audit, I'm not giving an audit opinion, right? Accordingly, it is not considered as an audit. It's only a certificate. So a different set of principles we will apply. Suppose if we are doing a quarterly numbers being reviewed, not full audit, limited review, then it is not called an audit, because we are not expressing an opinion as an audit opinion. We are only giving a review opinion. So we have to see what type of engagement which we are entering into with the client, irrespective of the activities, irrespective of the size, irrespective of the legal form, we are bound to follow the principles of standards on auditing. That's what exactly I'm picking up from this definition for you to understand. Independent examination of the financial statement of any entity, activities, size or legal form is not a consideration. Everything requires a similar input, because you are going to express an independent audit opinion. So now you understood what is the definition of audit. Let us link this definition with what is the auditor's responsibility. In every audit report, we are categorically going to say this. Without this, your audit report cannot be issued for any client, whether it's for non-corporate client. Even when I'm saying Form 3C(d), when you are seeing, this particular paragraph will be there, maybe in one form or other. That means the same English might be used or some other English might be used, but you are going to do the same activity. That's what the auditor's responsibility. Let us try to understand. This auditor's responsibility I am picking up from the company audit report. So audit of a private limited company, audit of a unlisted public company, audit of a listed company. Whatever you are doing, I am picking up from that responsibility. That's what I'm trying to say. Whatever responsibility which you are seeing here, in a different language, maybe there in an audit report which you are supposed to give for any other client. Let us read this. What we are confirming in the paragraph for audit opinion and saying that this is the responsibility and we have carried out. What we are saying is we have carried out the audit or conducted our audit in accordance with the standards on auditing specified under section 143 subsection 10 of the Act. That means under the Companies Act, these are all the standards on auditing which has been prescribed. And since we are doing an audit of a company, we have followed that particular section, which is mandatory for the purposes of a corporate audit or a company audit. We are openly saying we have carried out our audit in accordance with the standards on auditing specified under section 143 subsection 10. What is the standards on auditing specified under section 143 subsection 10? When you go into the section, you will find out one important aspect. It will say that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is in the process of notifying certain standards on auditing, and till such time the standards on auditing has been prepared and notified, the standards on auditing issued by the institute which are presently applicable will be the standards on auditing. That means whatever is issued by the institute is the standards on auditing now. We have to ensure that those standards on auditing has been complied with. That is what we are giving an explicit confirmation. We carried out our audit in accordance with the standards on auditing. After having said, if somebody is asking you to show a work paper, how you have assessed what is the risk involved in the particular client's audit, and how you have determined what is your audit response for the assessed risk. Two different standards on auditing comes in. SA 315, SA 330. SA 315 is saying that actually that is the efficiency of audit I have to talk about. Maybe I will pick it up when I'm showing the particular slide on the audit. If we do the audit in accordance with 315 and 330, and then keeping that our audit planning document and carry out our work in accordance with what we have planned and document that, that's enough that you are complying with the requirements of standards on auditing under section 143 subsection 10. So accordingly, we will discuss on 315 and 330 additionally, apart from the two specific standards which we are going to talk about. We will also touch upon the other standards which are critical for the purposes of evidence collection to ensure that yes, the fixed assets have been properly stated, the turnover has been properly accounted for. So we will try to understand that. One explicit compliance we have confirmed, and second important thing which we are saying, these standards requires that we comply with the ethical requirements prescribed by the Companies Act, as well as the ethical requirement prescribed by the Code of Conduct of the Institute, both, right? We should be ethical, we should be independent of the audit client, and we are planning and performing our audit. For what purpose? To obtain a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement, either due to error or fraud. Fraud is a big terminology. There is a separate standards on auditing on fraud, SA 240, but for the clients of ours, clients may not be so serious about committing a fraud on the financial numbers. My experience with my clients, and when I have done my individual practice in a smaller way, and slowly we have grown to a reasonable level. And when I gone to Big Four and came back to my own practice, when we are a mid-sized firm now, whatever I have seen is that the clients which are small in size or medium in size are never ever have to be doubted about their integrity. That means whether I can rely on the statement given by my client. My experience is that 90%, or even I can say 95% of the cases, whatever integrity which you are relying on the client is demonstrated in their normal activity, especially places like Tirupur, Coimbatore, or Madurai, or Trichy. In those areas, the people are family-oriented business, right? When they are family-oriented business, they are more worried about the reputation risk rather than anything else. So even a smaller mistake will cost them, and their names will be there in the newspaper or in any other forum. They don't want it to have it. So to that extent, what we are seeing is that 95% of the clients, the integrity is not required to be questioned. Having said that, I always use a particular phrase that is trust but verify. What do you mean by trust but verify? I will trust my client, no issues, but have I validated the trust? Is there any question which I have to raise because of something going little differently compared to the previous experience which I'm having? That is exactly, it says that have you planned and performed the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement, either due to error or fraud. For the time being, we are not going to discuss more on the fraud. Possible situation of error, how we will do an audit and ensure that there is no error. When I'm saying error, please understand, smaller trivial errors we are not bothered. The definition itself is saying that it is actually material misstatement. It is only saying material misstatement when we are talking about. If you are seeing this, we are talking about material misstatement, right? So we are talking about a material misstatement. Whether the material misstatement is what we wanted to look into, that is what we are trying to achieve from the particular aspect. Maybe I can say that this is what we are looking for, right? We are looking for this in our client, whether there is a material misstatement or not, right? Okay. So when we are talking about this, again, what we are trying to find out is that we are trying to understand the standards on auditing, and then we are talking about what is the ethical requirement which we are supposed to follow. Ethical requirement, ethical code of conduct 2019 is the best choice for you to discuss. That itself is going to be a separate session. How you are planning the audit, how you are performing your audit, what is the reasonable assurance, and whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. If we concentrate on these 6 areas, our responsibility has been duly discharged. Now, we are going to discuss about the standards on auditing, which we are going to use. Sir, I'm just thinking about one question which is coming in. Will systems audit and audit of stockbrokers interfere with the independence of statutory audit? Is one of the question. Definitely no, sir. When you do a systems audit, you are doing an independent verification. Similarly, when you are doing the audit of the stockbrokers in accordance with the stock exchange requirement, there also you don't have an issue because you are going to issue an independent opinion. But at the same time, I will explain one particular situation. Sir, I'm audible or not, sir? Somebody is mentioning voice went up, unable to hear you.
Sir, it is audible for here. Hello?
Hello?
Audible, sir.
It is audible, sir. It is audible.
Okay, okay. Maybe he is having his own site issues. Maybe he can.
Internal issues, I think.
Yeah. Internal thing. So when we are saying systems audit as well as the stockbrokers audit, nothing to worry in accordance with the stock exchanges or whatever you are doing. But one problem which I have seen in my particular situation where one of my client was dealing in Forex, foreign currency. So he is actually dealing with the what do you call the buying and selling foreign currency in accordance with the RBI situation. Okay. In RBI, there was a requirement to ensure that the buying and selling is in accordance with the RBI regulation, and they called that as a concurrent audit. So the client has came and asked us to do a concurrent audit of what they are doing and give a report. And then we are also has to do a statutory audit. But when we are looking into the requirement of the concurrent audit, it is more or less like an internal audit. So based on the terms and conditions, we identified that it is like an internal audit, specifically talking about the systems and the procedures and other aspects. And that is conflicting with the statutory audit. So we have told them that, sorry, we cannot do the concurrent audit. You please appoint somebody else as your concurrent auditor so that there is no conflict. That's the one area where I have seen that there seems to be a conflict of interest. And some clients, whenever we are having, I have seen certain cases where the audit invoice itself says statutory audit is so much, concurrent audit per month so much, and bookkeeping so much. That is a very clear indication of your conflict of interest. So be careful about doing certain services which are purely prohibited under section 144. So if it is prohibited under section 144, same logic applicable as per your code of conduct also for non-corporate entities also. If it is unavoidable that you are doing it, how the terms of engagement has been structured, you please take the clue out of it. How about charging the client in such a scenario, sir? Can we charge for entry audit and statutory audit separately? Perfectly all right, sir. Nothing is a problem. Even for example, if I'm doing an audit of a listed company, every quarter we are actually doing an audit. That is a separate engagement which we are having. And billing is also done every quarter of the audit is over. And another thing is the statutory audit. In fact, if you see the way in which you have to raise a bill, it also says that you can have an arrangement with the client for progressive billing. What do you mean by progressive billing? I have agreed that these are all the work which we are going to do as part of our terms of engagement, but we are doing it on a regular basis. Month on month, we are visiting and spending some time and closing it out. Can I raise a partial bill for the work I have performed? Perfectly all right. Only thing, please ensure that it is not resulting in an advance being paid by the client. So you can, in the letter of engagement itself, you can define what is the progressive billing which you are agreeing. Month on month, how much you are going to charge, and the year end, what you are going to charge. Like that, you can agree with the client and have a documentation. And if you are raising a bill, absolutely no problem. I should share with you, out of my Big Four experience as a partner in audit, the terms of engagement very clearly will say that we will raise a progressive bill which are payable on submission. Even now, I am following the same principle when I am doing work for Ind AS transition. Majority of the clients have come to us for Ind AS transition, but Ind AS transition is a process which we are doing for nearly 6 months. And when we are doing the 6 months at work, the first 2 years might be done quickly, but the last year, till such time the statutory audit is over, we have to wait and handhold them. So if I'm waiting for the entire process of 6 months, my work might have been 80% over, but I'm not billing anything. We have to also survive, right? And our working capital requirement should also be met. And we have to have our cash flows being taken care. So to that extent, progressive billing is perfectly all right. You can bill it. Absolutely nothing which prohibits. Only prohibition which is coming in is that do not charge as a percentage of success fee. One example which I can talk about is that you are preparing the project report for your client. Tirupur is very, very common. Majority of the people, when I have interacted, whenever I'm visiting there, even the new freshly qualified chartered accountant, when they are starting the practice, they are able to sustain the practice mainly because of the project reports, CMA data, etc. Suppose if you have a link or you have a connect by which you can get loans for your client. So that is not as a statutory auditor. You are doing a consultant job. But when you are doing a consultant job, can I say that fee is as a percentage of my loan based on actual sanction? Don't get into that, because success fee is prohibited for chartered accountants as per code of conduct. So similarly, when you are going for an appeal with the income tax department, if it succeeds, minimum fees payable is so much. If I'm able to get a favorable order, this is the additional fee. Don't say that. Only the success fee or as a percentage of revenue, etc., is not possible. There should be a fixed fee agreed upfront, but you can have a cost overrun. For example, when we have originally agreed that in case if I'm agreed with the client that I will visit every month 2 days or 3 days, but in a particular situation the client requires, because they are going for an expansion, they need some help, and they ask you to come for 10 days a month. So your workload increases, there is a cost overrun. So for the cost overrun, you can actually ask the client and negotiate and get the billing. That is also not prohibited. It is not impacting your independence, code of conduct, etc. Is fee charged on percentage of completion of work prohibited? That's what I'm saying. Don't say percentage of completion of the work. You will say that this is the work which we will be meeting at every timeline, and based on the timeline what we are going to do, because the percentage of completion of the work very difficult to assess. It is not a contract, so accordingly it will be very difficult. For example, I might have done the audit of a particular month or a particular quarter within 3 days or 4 days, because that quarter is not having any issue, any complex scenario, no new development, no big impact on the sales, no major capitalization which is happening. But in the subsequent quarter, there is something huge investment on fixed assets is happening, or a lot of exports, new areas have been started. You may require to spend more time. So don't say as a percentage of completion of the work, but say that this is the billing cycle. And in the billing cycle, anything which I have to charge additionally, we will discuss and agree. But don't say as a percentage of work completed. That will be a problem, sir. Because the moment you use the word percentage, people will think that you are charging on a percentage of a success fee. So don't get into that. One of the point which I wanted to tell you for all of you for the company audit, this year there could be challenges for us to do an audit in a remote situation. Even today, maybe normally I used to join the session 15 minutes earlier, but I could not join. If I joined, that technical error might have been taken care. In fact, I have learned what is a technical error today. So hereafter, that will not happen. So I just use another software. That software for the webinar, I have just finished it for doing an audit of a client remotely. And after that, when I came back, the audio system in Zoom was assuming different volume settings. So I have to go to Zoom and then adjust the volume settings, not just pressing the audio settings here. Mute audio or unmute audio, it is not working. Actually, I have gone into the setting and then made the changes. I learned something new. If anybody is complaining my audio is not working, hereafter I will learn, because that is the benefit of making an error. Okay. So in the remote audit, when we are doing an audit, what are all the things which has to be focused upon, especially when you are doing an audit of a company? In fact, my job is little easier because majority of us participating in this webinar might have done bank branch audit remotely, because at that time, almost the containment was completely there. Traveling from one location to another location was typically a challenge. And accordingly, the bank branches started giving the information, maybe through mails or through, we call it as a drive or a platform where we call it as a war room, where the data are dumped and we are pulling the data and validating. And whatever scanned copy which we are asking, they will put it in the drive and we will look into that and then complete our audit. So we are having a little bit of remote audit experience. That same remote audit experience has to be extended further till such time the lockdown is fully lifted. For example, we were comfortably doing this work for our clients, because the June 30th was the timeline which has been fixed initially by the stock exchanges. Today only they have extended by another 1 month. But in majority of the cases, it's not going to be helpful for the auditor, because 1 week before they are supposed to give the notice to the stock exchanges when they are going to have the meeting for adoption of accounts. Assuming 30th, the client might have sent the notices on 23rd itself. So that means ruled out on majority of the clients whether this extension will help. In fact, in the morning, one of the independent director who is a chartered accountant has called me and asked, we have already sent a notice to the stock exchanges that we are going to have the meeting on 29th. But now we are having a situation of extension. Our accounts are not fully ready. We are under pressure to complete within another 3 days or 4 days. It may be difficult for us. In that situation, what is the choice which we are having? Can we hold the meeting and say that accounts are not adopted? It is considered in a separate meeting, or we can give a new notice to the stock exchange saying that with the extension and the preparation of financial statement in remote situation, it seems to be difficult, and accordingly the company plans to have it at a different date. Give the stock exchange advance notice. That is whether that option is better. I suggested the second option by saying that don't say that you have hold the meeting and defer the accounts adoption. That will be looked into differently, whether you have some problem with the accounts. Whereas when you are saying that you have extended the time and I wanted to have a complete work being done and accordingly it may be requiring little bit of additional time. Everyone will understand because of the lockdown situation. So that type of questions always comes to our mind, but we have had little bit of experience in doing the bank audit, but not a complete level of the audit in a remote situation. Most of the time in a bank branch audit, we might have concentrated on the provision for doubtful debts or substandard assets and provision for the second aspect which we might have considered is the various certificates which the auditor has to give. We might have collected only those information. And on the profit and loss account, we might have done only a very, very limited trend analysis, not more than that, right? And even physical verification of cash was not possible. Physical verification of jewel packets is not possible. The quality of the jewels which are there is also not possible. So to that extent, we might have made a disclaimer also when we are issuing the audit opinion. So all those things is fine. But it's a limited remote audit. How we are going to have a detailed remote audit for this particular year? My feeling is 30th June is what is the lockdown presently being given for Chennai, and this has been extended to Madurai also today. And there is a discussion that it may be extended to other states also, other districts also. If that is going to be the case, whether on 30th it will be lifted, or since we are familiar with the 3 months of lockdown, why can't another 15 days lockdown to flatten the curve? So if that is the only solution which is available for the doctors and the medical team to ensure that the curve is flattened and there is no increased infection, there is every possibility it may also get extended. We assume that it will not get extended. In case if it is extended, you cannot wait for doing the audit only at a later point of time. So remote audit has to be started, and we should not forget about how audit will be done now, because with the 3 months scenario, majority of us are not fully involved in actual work. Maybe for 15-20 days, I was going to the office completely involved as if I'm a normal audit. All of a sudden, they said that from today onwards, we are bringing back the original lockdown. So when we are actually not in touch with what we are supposed to do, there could be a possibility of we are not equipped well to take care of the entire pressure. For example, I had a pressure. If the lockdown was not there, I might have been completed my statutory audit. I might have completed my audit of listed companies much earlier. Somewhere in May 15th itself, I might have completed. One particular client used to complete the entire thing by... Sir, can I request people to mute themselves, sir? The reason why I am asking you to mute is not because it disturbs me and the others, but sometimes your client information is publicly available to us, and sometimes your family matters is also available to us. Only for that purpose, I am asking you to mute yourself. Some of the cases might have been over by May 15th itself, but it is getting extended to June. We had one problem, getting data from the client. And client, one example I will tell you. One of the client has not even prepared the financial statement. They have fixed the board meeting on 29th. And they have had the guts to send me that mail saying that we have fixed the board meeting. Then I have only sent, even if the financial statement is not ready, the board meeting is going to consider the financial statement. I am not able to understand what is the basis. Can you please explain to me? Immediately, the CFO has called me and said that, sir, not the idea, sir. We are in the process of finalizing. I said, sir, you can finalize, not a problem, sir. Only problem is I should also reasonable time to look into that. So give me with whatever level of your preparation, I will finish off my review and say that these are all the areas I have to specifically talk to you. So 80% of my work will be over, and we can retain only the 20% when you are ready fully, so that it can shorten the time which is required for completing my entire audit process. If you are giving only on 25th and 29th your board meeting, I have to only say that, sir, humanly impossible. So that is what the remote audit has actually made us to understand. One, like what I have told my client is that give me the financial statement, even if it is only 50% ready, so that I can do the audit of the presentation of the financial statement, not even numbers. Presentation of the financial statement, whether it is in accordance with Schedule 3, all the disclosure requirement has been fully complied with. That is also I will check. These two things I can do with even the first cut financial statement, or I can use that. It's a very, very basic draft of the financial statement prepared by the client. We can get that. Or in case, if the client's data is available, not up to March, now March must be ready. Suppose if it is not available even up to March, but February data is available, because they might have done the entire work properly, then only the last 7 days you had the problem of lockdown. Get that data, check the financial statement presentation or disclosure related work. Anything can be done and reduced. There is a procedure which the standards on auditing says is that you do an interim audit for 11 months and roll forward your understanding for the next 1 month. Bigger companies, how they are able to publish the results within 7 days or 8 days, they concurrently do the audit up to 11 months or maybe up to a cutoff period, and the balance period they will roll forward and only check a major entry which is completely deviating. So for example, 11.5 months I have done the work, half a month I have not done the work. 11.5 months projected to 12 months, what is the number I'm expecting and what is the actual number they are giving for March, whether the deviation is acceptable level. If there is a big deviation, maybe a heavy downfall or heavy increase, what is the reason for that? Only those areas I will do that. We call it as a roll forward procedures. This is possible as per standards on auditing, but you have to be very, very clear how you can document that you have done an interim audit. That is, interim audit should be a detailed audit. For example, 7 of our clients, which are not listed company, which are unlisted company, private limited company, but they normally used to have their financials closed by June. That means they wanted the sign off before June. We normally take it up in September because we have 6 months time from the end of the reporting period. But these clients, when they are coming, used to tell us that we wanted to close the entire review within June, or some of them are claiming even for March, May. But we used to say that May is for listed companies and June we can consider. When we are talking about June, how we will be able to achieve this when there is a lockdown? Interim audit is one of the situation. In the 7 of the clients where I'm talking about committed for June, and of course now the ball is in their court because some information has to come back. Unfortunately, they are not able to open the factory because of the lockdown. So informations are not coming in. They have said that from 1st July we will work out. But if you ask me, we have completed 80% of our work. 20% is only required. Maybe 2 to 3 days of additional work with the team members. It is possible for us to close it because we concentrated on the financial statement presentation and what are all the items which will affect the disclosure. Routine disclosure last year, this year there is no new development, then absolutely no problem. One of the company has actually sold its land, excess land during this period. So there is an additional disclosure required. Have we prepared all the information which are required to be done? One of the clients' customer went into insolvency and bankruptcy, IBC code. So he has filed a application before the resolution professional to collect that money. And when this information is available, what is the possibility of recovery which will be coming in and what type of notes which we have to have for trade receivable in respect of that particular customer. So these are all the things which we can actually understand. This is when we are doing about the presentation and disclosure. Another area is basically what I am talking about, the risk assessment and responding to the assessed risk. What do you mean by risk assessment? I will give a simple example. When you are talking about a manufacturing company in Tirupur, and the manufacturing company is completely exporting its productions to European Union, maybe in Brazil or Germany. And what type of risk associated with that? I can say maybe 2 + 1, 3 is a major area of concentration. One is what is your export, and whether the export has reached the customer has accepted. So sales accounting could be one area where you have to verify. That could be a possible risk. You're dispatched, but it's not reached the customer's port, and to that extent, customer is not taking the risk and rewards. One possibility. Second, coming to the sales, we will come to that little bit later. The second possibility is that I have built certain items before the lockdown, but I could not send those material before 31st March. So whether the sales has to be recognized as sales or it has to be reversed could be the second area. And the third could be you have finished goods stock and also stock of raw material and WIP relating to a particular model, which can be exported only to a particular customer. But that customer's country is having a problem because of COVID-19. And what you are going to do, whether you will be able to convert that into finished goods and the finished goods can be sold, or the raw material or the finished goods has to be revalued at a value less than the cost. Could be one challenge. So inventory is the second area of concentration. Third area of concentration is possibly outstanding debtors, export sales, whether it can be collectible within the period. The third possible risk. All other things are your normal purchases. So purchased, you know pretty well, your material cost will be so much because of the same product, right? So what is the input output ratio? You know pretty well. Last year was the material consumption is so much of percentage, and that percentage remaining to be the same in the current period also. You can have comfort on your purchases and consumption. Whereas closing stock has to be looked into differently, sales has to be looked into differently, and your debtors has to be looked into differently. Arising out of that, the fourth area could be whether the possibility of non-collection or orders being cancelled or orders being delayed, schedules are not given for exports, whether the entity is able to survive for the next 12 months from 31st March 2020. For example, I have fixed cost of every month, say 30-40 lakhs. So for the next 4 months or 5 months, I'm not sure now when the market will be opened, 4 months or 5 months, the actual fixed cost which I should meet is 1.5 crore. Whether the 1.5 crore will be able to be managed by the client, or the client cannot be able to sustain that loss. In that case, how they are going to manage this business for the next 1 year. So that's a fourth consideration. So you are trying to identify what could be the possible areas where you have to worry about it, and to that extent, what type of validation which you have to do. That is exactly what we are saying, risk assessment and responding to the risk assessment. So stock valuation, we will concentrate more. Sales area, we will concentrate more. Debtors collection, subsequent collection, we will concentrate more. We will also look into, based on this, cash flow is not an issue for the next 1 year. So we are comfortable. That is the response to the assessed risk. This can also be done in a remote manner. Is there any increased risk compared to the previous period because of this particular situation, unforeseen situation? The next is, we normally look for bank confirmation. We look for confirmation from the debtors. If you are starting the audit in June and sending a confirmation for 31st, very difficult to get within 1 week or so, because the moment it's opened, client will be interested in getting their audit over, because bank will be pressurizing them to get an audited accounts. they will not be waiting for any extension of time or something like that. In that particular situation, when the pressure is coming from the bankers, you know pretty well, the clients who has taken loans and who wants loans will normally look for provisional financial statement. They will be looking for audited financial statement because the pressure is coming from the bankers. Even somebody has asked me that, sir, one of my client is asking for a provisional financial statement as of 31st, and he has only shared me the tally backup. Is it possible for me to complete the provisional financial statement? I told him, sir, you are going to sign the provisional financial statement as well as the final financial statement. So accordingly, when the tally backup has come, as if you are doing the complete audit, please do that audit. Or otherwise, at least do that audit up to February and give a provisional financial statement only for that. Let the client give a projected number to the bank, and you don't give sign off the projected number. Only the provisional number up to 11 months you give it. And on that basis, you can actually do that. Similar concept which we have started adopting, that for sending a confirmation of balance, we normally send the confirmation of balance for debtors, advances, deposits based on February number. If it's a big client, you do that. Otherwise, you need not do that. Big client, at least a medium-sized client, when you are doing the audit, my suggestion is send that based on February number. Before February number is already available because client might have already completed their accounts up to February. Take that number. I'm talking about mid-size companies, not smaller companies, because mid-size companies, they have the method of reviewing the monthly profitability. I have seen their control systems are much higher than anything else. When I have seen some of the groups with whom we came and set up their internal audit process, or maybe their entire setup. I worked in the initial stages before I joined Big Four. I worked for two of the big groups in Tirupur and Coimbatore. They are based out of Tirupur, and then they are also having activities in Coimbatore, Chennai, everywhere they are having. So we have actually helped them in doing it. But when we went and understood their business, we have seen that their process of reviewing was much better than a full-fledged audit. So that means you can rely on the client's comforts, how they are relying. Management is reviewing the work and how they are getting the comfort that these numbers are reliable. That will be helping you to do an interim audit for 11 months. On the basis, you can send a confirmation, keep it ready. Only 1 month you do the overall roll forward procedure, complete the entire work. It is permitted as per standards and audit. And this is one thing which we have tried. We have tried for listed companies also. What we have tried was using Excel, using data analytics tools of Excel. Excel contains what we call it as a Power Query. The Power Query is much higher than what we normally do for a normal data analysis. At the maximum, we will only do a VLOOKUP, or we will create a pivot table for youngsters who are familiar with the system I'm saying. But when you are going to Power Query, it is like in Tally, I will give a parallel, then you will understand. In Tally, what we normally try to do, when we wanted to review the items which are more than 1 lakh rupees, you can actually go and set a tone, no? Filter all vouchers which contains amounts exceeding rupees so much and containing narration so much, so and so. If you are clicking all this button in Tally, it will filter only those transactions, right? Similar thing with a high volume of data. If you have done that logic properly for one client, you can use it for the other client also. We have, in fact, tried to set up this entire thing for one listed company where our team has spent more than 1 month to set up this. For the next listed company, I have told them that only the data source is going to be changed. Change the data source and whether it is coming properly or not, because the logic has been set properly. It throws out what are the possible audit exceptions which I wanted to check. For example, any cash payment above 10,000, it has given the list. Any purchases with the narration of maybe I can say that purchase of so and so. We have filtered. I'm just giving an example. Filtered that purchase of in repairs and maintenance expenses. When we are talking about purchase of, it could be an asset or it could be a spare, right? So when it is filtered, it filtered with a number which we have given. We have told that anything more than ₹1,00,000 pull out. Instead of going through the entire ledger, the system has analyzed and given as 12 vouchers. And the 12 vouchers, when we have analyzed, we have found out that 3 vouchers is to be capitalized. Like this, you can think about increasing your capability of doing your audit based on data analytics. Excel comes with a lot of further thing. You might have also attended some of the Excel related seminars which has been conducted, and those will also be of very good help to you. And this data analytics and ledger review can be combined together and will throw out what is the only vouchers which you wanted to see, or what is the only data where there is a one problem. For example, we have done one analysis in debtor cases. We set an exception, only opening balance and no transaction during the year. Same thing continues in the current period. We asked the system to analyze those ledgers and give us the report. We have done another thing, no opening balance, no closing balance, only transaction during the year and closed. Why we wanted to do that is, when we are doing an audit of a bigger companies, there could be a possibility that one entry might have been passed to boost the sales, and that might have been offset by means of some other adjustment entry. Okay, maybe they are worried only in the top line and they are not worried about the bottom line. So when the transactions happened, even if in your tax audit you have to report one particular item, no, where the loan has been squared up during the year. Similarly, we are asking for the ledgers which has been raised during the period and squared up during the period. We got a lot of insights on that. And another case which we have seen is that no transaction for the last 6 months. We have seen that balances. And we have also took the ledgers of the subsequent period and compared what is the closing balance and what is the subsequent collection with that. All these things where we are supposed to do it, we might be doing for 2 months or 3 months. It can be done for a simple time. Maybe we have done 7 days or 8 days of analysis and only following it up that work. You may ask a question, sir, can I expand this for a smaller and medium companies? My feeling is with Tally it's possible. And my feeling is if the client is not having Tally, you can take the ledger dump, especially the GL dump, and you can do the analysis using Excel and concentrate on the big ticket items. For us medium-sized enterprises, it is also possible. You can think about doing that particular analysis. Another thing which we have seen helpful to us, which you can actually use it, which is permitted as per standards for auditing, is we normally do this. Current year number, previous year number. What is the change between these two? Whether that trend analysis, change in the trend, is it acceptable to us or there is any big variation? If there is a big variation, what is the reason? Deep dive into that particular account balance alone. That will also give you elaborate idea. In fact, after seeing one of the video on bank audit, we have used the technique for trend analysis in a different manner. We used to only analyze current figure and the previous year figure, right? No, we have done for 4 years. Current year, previous year, year before last year, and one more year before that. Just trial balance has been plotted. P&L account has been plotted, balance sheet has been plotted. We have just analyzed what is the variance. If the variance remaining the same and in expected levels, there is no focus required for that particular area. It is only overall audit which is required. Whereas if the variation is significant, that becomes a significant accounting balance according to standards on auditing. Concentrate and work on what is the risk relating to that particular account, how you are going to validate that particular account. That is what a trend analysis can throw you out a lot of things. And trend analysis is actually giving you a lot of comfort as per the standards and auditing. Another thing is need for alternative audit procedure. I think that yesterday I was talking for another branch. No, not yesterday. Day before yesterday, we were talking for another branch, where one of the question came was, sir, is it possible for physical verification being done based on recording, video recording, and can the auditor rely on that video recording? The reason why they are asked this question is, I will tell you, in a company audit, one of the clause in company's auditor's report order, that is a CARO 2016, 2020 is applicable only next year, 2016, you are talking about whether the company has carried out physical verification of inventories and whether the frequency of the physical verification is reasonable considering the size and nature of the business, whether any discrepancy has been identified in such physical verification, and if so, whether they have been dealt with appropriately in the accounts. 4 questions: whether carried out, whether reasonable, third, whether there is any discrepancy, whether the discrepancy has been taken into consideration. But the problem is the physical verification of inventory also requires the auditor to be part of the observation. When they are taking stock, you are supposed to be part of it. Up to last year, I'm just giving a very, very plain statement, maybe straightforward statement. Up to last year, if you have not participated in the physical verification of inventory, nothing is going to be known to anybody. Even if you are simply copying, pasting from the previous year's audit report, that everything is all right, nobody is going to question. But this period, 2020, if you are having the same comment saying that the company has carried out physical verification of inventory at reasonable intervals, and the frequency of that verification is reasonable considering the commensurate with the size and nature of the business, discrepancies identified is not material to the financial statement. If you are giving this, assuming that your accounts has been picked up for technical review by the registrar of companies, they can only ask you one question. 31st March, company is closed, you are also closed. You are not even permitted to come out of it. Even some of the outlets like Taskmark has started only after that, right? So you are not even able to come out of your office, come out of your home. How you have participated in the physical verification of inventory? Anybody can ask this question. How you will be able to demonstrate? Very, very difficult to do it. Some of the companies have actually used drones in which the video recording of the entire proceedings has been shared live with the auditors, and the auditors have asked them to move on certain directions. Big companies have done it, not small companies. Whether it is an alternative audit procedure, perfectly all right. It can be done. Okay. Another alternative audit procedure, one of the client, when we said that the client has carried out the physical verification, everything is fine, but because of lockdown, we are unable to participate in this, and to that extent, we are not making any comment on the discrepancy or something like that. Disclaimer is possible because that is what the guidance is also coming out when you are unable to do any work. But one of the clients has said, we don't want that. We are not ready to accept this. Then we have said, there is one possibility which I can do. After the lockdown has lifted, we can do a physical verification along with you. Do again the stock verification, or you are going to do that for the first time because you are also not doing on 31st. Do that now, and we will do the roll backward procedure like I am doing for a cash verification at a bank branch audit. If you are able to reconcile, I will put that positive message saying that the physical verification has been conducted subsequent to the balance sheet date, and doing a roll backward procedure, the numbers have been reconciled with the financial statement. That is an alternative audit procedure. Have you done that alternative audit procedure is very important aspect. I should also add one point. A lot of cases in the financial statement, we normally used to have one comment. The balances of debtors and creditors are subject to confirmation. that is there in the part of the notes. What does it mean? You as an auditor saying that numbers are subject to confirmation. Have you got the comfort that the numbers, even if it is not confirmed, is correct number, or something is wrong, something has to be collected but not recorded properly? What is the procedure you have performed? Again, it says that you are supposed to do an alternative audit procedure. That's the reason why we always ask the client, could you be able to show me what is the subsequent collection of that receivable? That is an alternative audit procedure. You are supposed to look into that. You can never say it is subject to audit. If you're saying that your audit report is improper audit report or inadequate audit report, you have to carry out an alternative procedure, record that alternative procedure based on which, even though confirmation of balances are not there, you are able to conclude that nothing is misstated. So that is what you are supposed to do as an alternative audit procedure. Compliance with the Companies Act 2013, certain specific clauses you have to be little careful, which you can do well in advance based on the standards on auditing. And similarly, compliance with the accounting standard. Of course, I am not going to talk with the company's accounting standard because it's pure discussion on standards on auditing, how we are supposed to carry out our audit for 2020. Compliance with the Companies Act, remotely you can cover these sections. 169 says the directors are not disqualified from being appointed as the directors. You can validate getting some information from the client, and one portion of the work is already over. You can check whether the company has given any loans to the directors or director interested concern. In that case, whether there is a violation of section 185, this information can be taken from tally, and then you can ask the question and see the related papers and do the audit. Section 186, whether the company has given any loans, made any investment, given any security for the loans taken by others, whether it has given any guarantee for others, that is within the limit of section 186. Very recently, one of the client has sent me, I'm not the auditor for that particular client. I was doing another audit of that particular group. So the client has sent to me, sir, this is what our company secretary is asking us to put it in the director's report, whether it is warranted. So one of the point which the company secretary wanted to include is that the company is has given a intercorporate deposit to another company, and they have given the complete data about what is the name of the company, address, what is the date on which it is given, what is the amount given, what is the interest rate, etc. But the managing director is not comfortable in disclosing this for two reasons. One, the intercorporate loans have been given to a known group, and that known group doesn't want their name to appear in this financial statement because it goes as a public document. Another thing is, he doesn't want to show what is the rate of interest he charges for the ICD, intercorporate deposit. Because when somebody, because that entity was having surplus funds, when somebody is approaching that, they will say that for that company you have given this rate, why can't you give the same rate to me or lesser than that? Could be a negotiation point, no? So he has asked me whether this is a real disclosure which is required. I was surprised why that disclosure is required. For a simple reason, that company is a private limited company. For a private limited company, if I am looking into their share capital and reserves and surplus, it is actually saying 60% of share capital and reserves and surplus you can actually give without any approval from the shareholders. You can actually give it from the directors. So that means 186 is automatically covered. There is no violation, no requirement to pass any resolution, etc. When I have put that number and the section to them, then they have asked the company secretary. Company secretary said, sir, better practice we wanted to give it. So sometimes the better practice will also disclose certain sensitive information outside. So section 186 compliance also you can validate and have a comfort. Section 188, related party transaction. You can validate related party transaction based on the disclosure which has been made by the director, who are all the new related parties and what are all the transactions with the existing related parties of the last year, and any new disclosure is required. You can conclude that even before you go for a full-fledged audit, remotely you can do this entire work. Any resolution is required to be passed, etc. And another important point is when you validate section 188 related transaction, your work relating to 48(2)(b under the Income Tax Act 44(a)(b) is also getting covered. In one stroke, we can actually get two items have been completely reconciled or completely audited. Section 197 not applicable to private limited companies because it's talking about remuneration to the directors, whether it is in accordance with section 198. So the 197 and 198, if it is a public company, unlisted public company also it is applicable. And suppose if your client is a private limited company but subsidiary of a public company, there also it is applicable. In case if it is there, what is the maximum remuneration payable as per section 198? Just keep a template ready with the initial numbers and only update the numbers with the final one. Within 2 minutes, you can validate the entire thing, right? So this can also be remotely done for the compliance with the Companies Act in respect of your Companies Act for 2020. Another area is acceptance of deposit rules 2014, because a lot of items are considered as deemed deposit. Whether any items are considered to be a deemed deposit, all these items you can validate based on 11 months data. You can validate, and in case if there is a remedial action which is possible, take it appropriately. So that is an important point, 73 and 74 of the Companies Act relating to acceptance of deposit. Section 148 is talking about non-cash transaction with the directors. But of course, normally we don't have a non-cash transaction. In case if there is any, look into this. This is also can be complied upfront. Another one, last clause in Caro report, we are saying whether the company is required to get a registration under section 45(1)(a) of the RBI Act. We normally say no, but only requirement, if you go to the statement on Caro, it says, or technical guide on Caro, it says that if 50% of the total assets of the entity are financial assets and 50% of the income in the profit and loss account is arising out of financial asset. What is financial asset? The company has fixed deposit, the company has investment in shares, the company has investment in debentures. So if that is more than 50%, and what is the income? It is not sales, it is only interest income, it is only a dividend income, that is more than 50%, that company will be considered as a deemed non-banking financial company. So RBI Act requires. This validation also can be done. If any remedial action has to be done, that can also be taken care. So this also you can do as part of your corporate audit in the current period, doing a remote audit using the standards on auditing, whatever we are talking about, the assessed risk and responding to the risk. With respect to audit report, going concern assumption is one of the point. We will discuss that a little later. Auditor has to evaluate, that also I have discussed. Material uncertainty relating the going concern should come as a separate paragraph. We will look into that a little later. Internal controls, if IFC is applicable, but majority of our clients will not have IFC related requirement because of the net worth and the paid up share capital and borrowings. Physical verification of fixed assets and Caro, you have to be careful because client may not have carried out the physical verification and tallied that with the fixed assets register. Ask them to do the physical verification now and do the roll forward. Here the auditor is not required to do any personal appearance for physical verification of fixed assets. And accordingly, if the management gives a certification that they have carried out, you can test check and close it. But inventory, whatever we have discussed, has to be taken care as an alternative procedure. Any loan default, including whatever moratorium which has been given, 2 months extension of time for repayment of this, and whether the client will going to have problems in their repayment, that can also be taken into consideration. The lockdown period expenses, whether it has to be capitalized, whether it should be charged to revenue, very simple, it has to be charged to revenue because it will not be added to anything, including when you are allocating the overhead for inventory valuation. These expenses is only a fixed overhead, and accordingly, based on normal production capacity, you have to allocate it. Also look into what is the subsequent events, like what I have said. What happened to the sales which you have made? what is the inventory which you are having, whether it is saleable, whether it has to be reduced for net realizable value, whether your orders have been get cancelled, and if so, how you will be able to survive. Because of that, whether any provision for impairment has to be considered. All these are to be considered for the purposes of your audit report and assessment of your numbers. So this, you know, what auditors do, whatever we have discussed, understanding, responding to the client and all those things. Start to end also, we have know what is the audit procedure which we will apply according to the standards on auditing. And finally, the audit documentation is a crucial point. So the entire gambit of this, whatever we have discussed so far, is coming out of standards on auditing. I have not specifically mentioned what is the standards on auditing, but it is coming out of the standards on auditing, and we will connect with the audit. In fact, the audit, if you are talking about so many audit standards are there, classification. When you are having a audit, when you are having a limited review, standards on auditing, standards on review engagement. Other than historical information, that's a projected data or something like that, how you are going to do standards on assurance engagement guides you. If you are doing any compilation, any agreed upon procedure, stock audit, systems audit, it's all agreed upon procedure. It has a related services, something else is coming into that. Now, we will be focusing, so far focusing, and we will continue to focus only on standards on auditing. The standards on auditing, when we are talking about 200 series, 300 series, 400 series, 500 series, 600 series, 700 series are the standards. Don't worry about the series. I will just give the complete list for you. The background material is already shared for you, but I will pick up only one or two, which is crucial for a smaller and medium-sized enterprises when you are doing an audit, and how you can carry out successfully a company audit for the current season. One is you should understand what is the overall objective and also have a letter of engagement. Please ensure that a standard letter of engagement has been signed for every audit engagement which you are doing. Quality control, leave it. Audit documentation we are going to discuss at length, because this will help you to demonstrate that you have done your audit in accordance with the requirements of the Companies Act, in accordance with the requirements of the standards on auditing, in accordance with the requirements of the accounting standard, in accordance with the laws and regulations applicable to the entity. All these things will be based on audit documentation. We will discuss at length. Fraud, it says certain areas are possible that frauds will normally happen. So accordingly, auditor has to have certain procedure. In a smaller and medium enterprises, I normally do not experience any fraud, except maybe fraud committed by on the company, by the employees, like some embezzlement of stock, cash, or receivables collected and not accounted for, all those things. But company per se, whether they are engaged in doing a fraudulent activity, I don't think I have seen the majority of the cases, mainly because of the integrity and the discipline which the clients are having, especially when it comes to small and medium sized companies. What is the laws and regulations which are applicable to your client? Please have a complete checklist. Complete list of the laws and regulation, whether they have carried out or whether they have complied with the laws and regulation. If they have not complied with, what is the possible impact? Is it a penalty or it's a violation which will cause even for shutdown of the company, like Pollution Control Board? And how serious is the impact on the financial statement? Have you considered that particular aspect as part of your audit arising out of SA 250? That is one thing which you have to think about it. It also says that when you do an audit, you are supposed to communicate with those charged with governance. What do you mean by those charged with governance? In our case, normally it will be the board of directors. Have you discussed with the board of directors, or have you discussed with any of your managing director that this is what we have seen as an audit issue, and this is how it has been resolved, and these are all the explanation which we got from your finance team. This is what we wanted to get you clarify on us. Have you done that? I believe that this is a very, very important way of you doing an audit for a simple reason, the relationship is being maintained based on this. When you go and talk to your client and say that, okay, when two questions have come, one is from Balaji. He's saying whether India is applicable to companies listed in MSME platform. Sir, it is not MSME platform. They call it a SME platform. If it is called a small and medium enterprises platform, stock exchange, SME stock exchange, India is specifically not applicable, and accordingly, you need not worry about it because it's specifically excluded from that list. When you are calling out a listed company or proposed listed company, SME stock exchange is excluded, so it is not applicable. Another question which is coming from Gopalan is that the main problem in SA 250, in most of the companies, ESI PF is applicable, but they are not all registered with the ESI PF. In such cases, what is the statutory auditor should do? Very interesting question, especially relating to areas like manufacturing hub of Tirupur and any related areas. Only thing is how they are maintaining the register and getting the audit conducted for PF and ESI. So necessarily you have to look into this. In case if later on a heavy penalty is coming in for the past dues, you may also be questioned how you have validated. So two things which we are seeing: one, permanent employees which are in the roles of the employee company, whether the PF and ESI relating to that employees have been fully collected and remitted. The other one is contract employees being done through a contractor. Some companies are having a method of asking the contractor to prove or give the copy of the challan for remittance of the PF and ESI, then only the next month bill is actually processed. There is one good internal control which they are having. And interestingly, even in that case, some smart contractor has worked differently. We done a forensic audit for one of the client, and we observed that the same challan he has produced for 3 different companies and said that we have remitted your PF. And he has manipulated the names of the people to whom it has been done, because in a PF you will have only consolidated number now. So he has given the same thing. And then the client has decided, based on whatever observation which we have made, the client has decided that we will remit on behalf of the contractor and pay the net amount. Best way of doing it. So you can think about it. Unfortunately, I think that there is one question which is coming in. Maybe what I'm looking into that may be the case where the client himself is not showing the actual numbers. Then it's a problem. Expenses booked, but not ESI PF deducted and remitted is a problem. So there you have to be cautious and should have be ready to put it in your audit report, or at least create a complete awareness to the client what would be the impact on this. In fact, one of the things which is being talked about is if you're having less than 100 employees, the employer's contribution will be paid by the government. That is one of the stimulus package plan, right, for MSME. So how the company is able to get that? At least if you have a proper register, you will be able to do it. Otherwise, you are not entitled for it. There could be some sort of awareness which has to be created. That's what I believe with respect to laws and regulations relating to the client's business. And internal controls, we will forget about that. Responsibility of joint auditors, I don't think that we will have any problem in smaller areas, so we will go ahead. Planning and audit of financial statements, that's what I have explained to you. Identify what are all the risks and what are all the items which are relating to that. In fact, I used to tell them that identify the line item of your financial statement. Fixed asset, what is the standards on auditing? What is the risk relating to that? Additions during the year, deletions during the year, tallying with the income tax depreciation, recognizing the deferred tax asset. All these 4 items is what you are supposed to do, and tell them how it has to be done to your team members. That's enough for making a simple audit plan. And knowledge of the client plan business goes without any saying. Materiality, I don't want to discuss because majority of us are not ready to appreciate materiality. So, but that is the efficient way of doing an audit. And risk assessment, internal controls, computer audit environment, nothing great. Service organization, majority of our client will be doing in-house processing, not outsourced processing. So it is not there. So 500 series, audit evidence collection, you have to be careful. This 501 talks about how inventory should be done, how data should be done, how bank confirmation should be done. And it is also talking about external confirmation process, how it has to be carried out. A lot of special audit process has to be done. So accordingly, take out 501 and see whether these are applicable to you. If so, what is the line item in the balance sheet or P&L? And based on the line item, what is the work to be performed? I'm actually going to talk about a small checklist approach where we will talk about external confirmation. We have already discussed. Opening balances. If you are getting a new audit in the current period, then you have to check the opening balances also. We will forget about it. Analytical procedure is what is the trend analysis, which I was mentioning to you. In fact, that will be a very, very huge tool, very important tool, very efficient tool to assess whether something can go wrong in the particular account balance. Today also, I have asked one simple question about one of the client case. Just before entering into that, I have asked my team members, you are showing so much of deferred tax asset, but the deferred tax asset compared to the previous period has jumped almost double. But I could not see any other areas where your tax profit and book profits are significantly changing. Can you help me out in understanding what is the difference? Then the team member went back and said that instead of calculating deferred tax liability, they have calculated deferred tax asset, because Excel is a dangerous proposition. So that is what this analytical procedure or trend analysis can actually help you out. Audit sampling, the procedure you can adopt based on the particular standard when you are doing it. But now I believe that data analytics will analyze the 100% of the data and it can be useful for you. Related party transaction, we have already discussed about section 188. SA 550 says how to validate related party transaction under the Companies Act, under the preparation of financial statement, because related party transaction may be a transaction below the market price or higher the market price. And also 48(2)(b in tax audit. In all scenarios, SA 550 gives a guidance. Subsequent event also we have discussed. Whatever happened on 31st March and what is happening subsequent to that gives a lot of comfort on the numbers, including whether I have to test my inventory for net realizable value. Also, it gives a comfort. 570 is going concern. We will discuss a little bit on that. Please get a return representation, but understand that return representation is not a replacement for your audit evidence. Majority of us feels that I got a representation from the client, that is enough. No, you have to carry out your audit. You have to have your audit evidence collected. It may be substantiate a judgmental area, not for every area. For example, if inventory has been properly validated, one of the auditor has been pulled out in a bank fraud, where the auditor has mentioned inventory under that as verified and as verified and measured by the client. He used that phrase. They have simply said that you have relied on whatever number they have given, whereas there is no stock and you are a party who has certified that. And then the auditor has to show what are all the work papers with respect to inventory. It is a standard phrase which has been copied years together. So you have to be a little cautious on those numbers as well. Relying on the work of internal auditor, other auditors, we normally don't do, but we rely on the work of an actuarial valuation, actuarial report. So because of that, you should always see the base data given to the actuary and the assumptions taken by the actuary is reasonable. An audit report, we have already had a detailed discussion, if I'm not wrong, last year on the audit report. Suppose anybody wanted to understand further what is the new development, what we have to discuss, 27th I am going to present a paper for SARC for 3 hours on audit report alone. On these 4 standards, I'm going to discuss for 3 hours with case studies and a specimen audit report. You can join and do that. 27th is the date on which SARC is conducting a structured CPE for 3 hours. There we will have the discussion. And 2 standards which I wanted to tell you, most important standard. The slides have been already shared with you, but what I will just tell you is that you have to ensure that right from your planning stage, execution stage, and closing stage, proper documentation. If you have a judgment which has been exercised, how the judgment has been done, what is the source for the judgment, and how you have validated the correctness of the judgment. You have to record it. If there is a deviation from the required practice, how you have validated the deviation, how you ensure that it has not impacted the financial statement. If there are something relating to, let us just see that in every phase of the audit, planning stage, during the work being performed, when you are getting the audit evidence, what are all the audit evidence collected, how you are completing your final work paper file, every phase audit documentation is becoming critical. In fact, it says you have to contemporaneously document. When you do an audit, you have to do your work also simultaneously. 2 reasons. One is even we will forget what we have actually done. That's the reason why nowadays we are having the method of taking some post-it note or something like that, where we are writing out what are all the work to do and we are completing it. Similarly, for the audit also, simultaneous documentation is a preferred method. And the audit documentation should talk about this 5 points very, very importantly, or actually 4 points. What it says is that, suppose if you have maintained an audit documentation and you ask me to review your audit papers, maybe as a quality reviewer or peer reviewer, I am coming and reviewing your audit paper. When I am reviewing the audit paper, because I'm not having any connection with the audit, I'm just looking into your work papers, I should understand what is the nature, timing, and extent of audit procedure you have performed. So that is should be very, very clearly documented. What is the result of the audit procedure? By validating purchases, how you have selected the samples, how many samples have been checked with the purchased bills, and have you verified the gate pass? Have you ensured that actual material has been received? Have you verified the subsequent payment of the particular invoice? Who has authorized this? I verified everything and found out that this is recorded properly in the books. There is an error. Say, for example, 5 lakh bill has been accounted as 5,05,000 rupees by mistake. Those audit evidences which you have collected, what is the result which you have collected, and those significant matters, whether it has any impact on your audit conclusion, should, and also what is the judgment you have taken. All these things, I should be able to reach the same conclusion without having any verbal communication from you. That is what the quality of the audit documentation expected. But sometimes what happens is, what we have prepared, when we are seeing the next day, we are not able to understand. Okay. So standards on auditing expects that it should be very, very clear, and you have to be little cautious on that particular area. For a smaller audit, it will be a little less extensive. In fact, I used to tell that the partner will normally do a lot of work. And one thing which those people who have left early, losing this particular area, because I have seen that one of the beautiful literature which has been brought in by the institute is a practitioner's guide to audit of smaller entity. It was done long back. It was revised in 2020. 2020 edition is available, downloadable, free of cost from the institute website. You can simply Google out also, you can find out that particular post and download it. Please keep that. It is like a Q&A questions, question and answer type of format, plus a checklist. Please ensure that the checklist has been taken care for each of the items which you are doing the audit. That's enough for your audit documentation according to the standards on audit. That's what I wanted to tell you. And if there is no documentation, it will be presumed by the regulator that you have not carried out any work. Going concern mainly because of one simple reason. Old standard only asks you to give a emphasis of matter, but the new standard, SA 700 says, read with SA 570, requires you to specifically assess whether the company will be able to sustain for 12 months from the end of the reporting period up to 31/3/2021. If you have a doubt because of some issues like export orders cancelled, company has been closed, they are not able to reopen, they are not able to tie up for the working capital, they are not able to have the funds to support the long run process, etc. All those things could be a material uncertainty relating to going concern, how the entity still believes that the financial statement can be prepared on going concern. This should be a separate paragraph, mandatorily should be there in your audit report if there is a uncertainty of going concern. Otherwise, you are supporting that the financial statements can be prepared on going concern, because explicitly you will mention that. If you mention explicitly on this, but the company collapses, you will be questioned by all the regulator, including the lenders. So you have to be little cautious on going concern. I have given a lot of examples, like entity has borrowing which has to be repaid, but they don't have any renewal or repayment. Could be a question of going concern issue. Company is expanding its projects, but majority of the funds are not tied up with a long-term loan. It is tied up with only a short-term loan. How they are going to withstand? Company is manufacturing a particular chemical, but there is a restriction comes from manufacturing, import, export, marketing, and this is the only product company manufactures. We can take one simple example of what has happened yesterday. Patanjali has come out with 2 products for corona medicine, and they have said that it will cure even the corona impacted patients. And without getting the license from the Ministry of Home Affairs and the MHA approval, they wanted to market. They have been stopped to do it. And in case if the approval is not coming, and all these medicines which they have already having in stock is having an expiry date, and the expiry date means the entire stock has to be taken into consideration as a loss. Whether the loss can be sustained is not having a biggest impact on a go forward basis. Could be one example of going concern. We look each and every aspect of that. In fact, I used to tell that in the COVID situation, where your raw materials are relating to a particular product and that particular orders have been cancelled, what you will do with this? Is there an alternative use for this raw material? If it is not there, the raw material should be tested for NRV. So it should be returned down to its scrap value. That should also cause a big impact on the financial statement of the entity. Like this, we can go on having so many examples on going concern. But what I say is that always be careful that you have to bear it in your mind that there is a requirement to report specifically on the audit report. Maybe it is an adverse opinion, or it may be a specific comment on material uncertainty relating to the going concern, etc. So that is the conclusion of my session. If there are any specific questions, I will take those questions in addition to whatever we have answered. There is one question which came from Balaji. This is relating to, is it necessary to get an actuarial certificate for provision of gratuity for small private limited companies, because it is an extra burden for such companies? So can we rely on certificate from management? Sir, I will tell you one thing. Unfortunately, the company's accounting standard rules 2006 as amended by 2016 has not given any exemption for small companies with respect to actuarial valuation. It is only not for companies. Suppose if I'm saying it is a not for corporate entities other than companies. The standards, accounting standard AS 15 is applicable, which is issued by the institute. There only you have an exemption of, if the number of employees are less than 50, you need not go for an actuarial valuation. Management can prepare based on actual value basis. Unfortunately, it is not avoidable. But having said that, I have seen certain actuaries who are charging very reasonable fees because AS 15 is not requiring too much of disclosure. For example, if it is a small and medium company, it is not requiring to show the disclosure of the movement in obligation, disclosure of amount charged in P&L, disclosure of the investment you have made in group gratuity insurance. All those things is not required. It requires only the amount to be recognized plus what is the major actuarial assumption. If you are only asking for this particular report, they are considerably reducing their fees. So unfortunately, there is no exemption available for smaller companies under companies accounting standard rules. You have to necessarily go into that. No other alternative. Another question which is coming is SA 505, external confirmation. Is it compulsory for the auditor to circularize the negative or positive confirmation, or he can rely on the confirmation circulated by client? Which confirmation is better, negative or positive confirmation? Sir, it's an interesting point. In fact, I should tell you that if you see SA 505, it says the entire process of confirmation should be within the control of the auditor. That means even for sending a confirmation to the banker, what you are supposed to do is you should have your standard format, but the first paragraph will be signed by the client authorizing the bank to send it directly to the auditor. And you are supposed to post it, because I had that experience in certain cases where we have done an audit of one publication unit. We sent for confirmation of balances, and the article student was actually working on that. We have selected the samples, everything has been done. The client has come out and said that why you are bothered, your audit partner will ask that it has to be done only from your office. We have a franking mission, we will send it, you give it to me next, tomorrow I will give you the acknowledgement. Next day he has given the acknowledgement also. But what has happened was, majority of the confirmation was not, we are not getting the confirmation from the particular customer to whom we have sent. We were surprised what has happened. Even from the bank, we have not got. When we have tried that as an alternative procedure, one of the alternative procedure is, for example, if you are talking about bank, one of the procedure which we have told them is, nowadays everybody is doing net banking. We ask them to open the net banking in our presence, because I don't want to have the password, I don't want to have the username. I just ask them to open in my presence. Show me the statement of account for 31st March. Take a printout and sign off that you have downloaded this from the system, and also get the signature of the client. That could be an alternative confirmation which is there. But if client has sent a confirmation, it is not considered as a confirmation as per 505. What it says is that if you are relying on the confirmation received from by the client, do an alternative audit procedure. For example, in a smaller entities, bank confirmation we don't circularize. Client might have got the confirmation of balance at the period, the end of the period, and they give a Xerox copy to you. My suggestion is, get the original for your file, and also do an alternative procedure of verifying the bank reconciliation statement and ensure with a subsequent bank statement. To that extent, your audit procedure is over. Similarly, when a client is giving a confirmation circularized for debtors, maybe they are getting a regular statement of account and reconciling it. Get that confirmation, no problem. It is not external confirmation, but at the same time, validate how the client has reconciled this number with the books of accounts and what type of entries is coming in. Whether you can correlate the number with the books of accounts as well as subsequent payment, and what are all the major items which are sitting in the reconciling items, how they have been cleared. With that, Sridhar and Siddharth, sir, you can actually get some sort of alternative procedure. When you are talking about whether negative confirmation is better or positive confirmation is better, I normally say that positive confirmation is a better choice, because in a negative confirmation, we will normally say, if you are not hearing anything from you, it is assumed that the bank balance is correct. But legally, whether it's binding on the customer, I don't know. It's not possible. So positive confirmation is a better thing, because we will ask them to say, this is the balance as per the client's books, whether it matches with you. If so, say yes. If no, give your statement of account with the reconciliation. That's the way in which we normally look into. My suggestion will be a better thing to go for positive confirmation. ESIPF. So we have already seen that discussion. Again, it has come as a private message, but to me, the impact of confirmation of debtors with respect to Binami Act. This is another problem. That's the reason why I'm saying that you circularize if you are not able to circularize because because the standards on auditing on SA 505 says auditor need not circularize if 1, the risk involved in respect of the particular account balances are low. 2, past evidences shows that the response for your confirmation of balances is very low. That means I'm sending 100 confirmation requests, but 1 or 2 is returned, not happening. Third, there are some issues like I have seen one of the case where the client was saying that, sir, this particular party, we are actually having a litigation, so don't send it. So in that case, have you verified that particular case with the litigation and accordingly you are comfortable with that? Whether it has been shown as a contingent liability in case if it has to be disclosed. Have you verified that? That's the way in which I normally look into. In those cases, what it says that the auditor should do an alternative procedure to ensure that the balances which is stated in the financial statements are appropriate. Similarly, whatever circularization which a company has given or management has given, whether it is acceptable as an alternative audit evidence. That's what it says. So accordingly, you have to necessarily look into that, no other alternatives there. So if there are any other questions, I will take it up, or otherwise I will give it back to the Vice Chairman of the branch to do the concluding remarks.
So I presume that there is no query, sir.
Okay, sir. In that case, you can proceed with closing it. In case if somebody is having a query at a later point of time, they have my contact details. They can call me at any point of time. Some of your members normally in connection with contact with me whenever they have a specific audit query. We normally discuss and help them out. Similar thing we can also do for the coming period also.